片目潰してもいい？赤眼の細なんとかっていう中二病的な肩書きがつくよ。何迷ってんの？赤眼かっこいいじゃん。行くよ。
Hook, after being introduced to the student council and going on a few missions, you eventually finds his sister is the next ability user. At first, Yu doesn't take it that seriously, but as time goes on and events begin to unfold, he finds himself waking up in a hospital bed, knowing if she's alive. Episode 7. Suddenly awakening is Yu, who is approached by a doctor asking if he is okay. Yu's first question is about his sister, to which the doctor alerts him she has passed. Yu attends the funeral and is comforted by his mom, who abandoned them. Yu, still shocked by recent events, cries when he arrives home and is finally able to relax. He realizes what a bad big brother he was to her, thinking she disappeared too fast. Coos himself up in his room, pressed after losing his sister. After realizing he is out of food, he decides to rely on the noodles passed on to him by his uncle. Yu spends his days eating ramen and watching TV, until he is approached by Yusa and Takajo asking to hang out. Yu, however, ignores them and decides to stay depressed in his room. Misa takes over and tells Takajo to break the door down with his ability, but he tells her the doors are too strong. Misa considers burning the door down but reconsiders, thinking she'll come by again another time. The days go by and Yu continues to ignore all contact until Yumi lets herself in one day. She walks in nervously, but is disgusted to see him in such a terrible state. Yu asks her why she is there, to which she tells him she wants to see if she can help him at all. Tells her he's fine and doesn't need help with anything, but Yumi protests him. Offers him to go eat pancakes with her to remember the day she saved him. She refuses. Yu tells her he doesn't want to, but asks if she can help with something. She gets excited, but her excitement turns to anger when he asks her to go buy him ramen. She tries to get him to go outside, but Yu gets angry at how pushy she's being. He kicks his ramen at her and pushes her away, showing his anger. Tells her if she won't run his errands to go home, so she does without saying another word. Next day, Yu's door is knocked on by two men in suits, hoping to capture him for his ability. Yu takes control of the men, forces them to immobilize themselves, giving him the chance to run to the store. Yu heads to the ATM and withdraws all of his funds, preparing to go on the run. Yu continues to relocate until he stumbles upon an internet cafe. He rents one and decides to stay there for the next few days and waste his life away. Eats pizza every day and neglects his vegetables, making his health worsen. Days go by until Yu eventually gets bored and decides to find something to do. He walks around town looking suspicious until he decides to buy a meat skewer, eats it on the way to the arcade, decides to play a zombie game. He shoots all of the zombies like a maniac, wasting all of his money, shouts at the screen as he kills the zombies, him being in his own world. One day when he arrives to play the game, a couple of thugs are playing. It's meat skewers as he waits until he eventually gets put up with them playing, so he kicks the trash at them, tells them they have been playing too long and they decide to take him outside. Three bring him to a back alleyway and Yu laughs at them, takes control of one of the grunts, makes them attack the other. He continues to control each of the men, making them injure themselves. Yu takes one of the meat skewers and stabs it into his leg. He then grabs another and eats it in front of him, stabbing his other leg in the process. This moment sparked a new desire in Yu, the desire to pick on the weak. Next day, he walks around looking for a fight until he stumbles upon a gang. With his meat skewer in hand, takes control of various members, stabbing the leader with one of them. Yu grabs the head of the leader and asks him if he's ready to be stabbed by the meat skewer. Man admits defeat to Yu, knowing he can't overpower him. After this, Yu continues to take control of various people, making them fight within. After taking down tons of groups, Yu laughs to himself like a psycho. One day after beating up a gang, he finds a drug hidden by one of the members. Yu takes it with him and attempts to smoke it, but is stopped by Tomori. She tells him she has been watching him this entire time. If he goes any further, will be lost for good. Tomori tells Yu it's her fault for not taking the proper precautions to protect his sister. Yu asks her what he wants her to do, and she suggests going back to the school and eating a proper meal. Yu is hesitant to follow her, but agrees after Tomori promises him she will leave him alone after he tries one bite. Tomori leads him to her family home where no one lives. Yu lays on the couch and watches Tomori cook his dinner. He falls asleep but wakes up to be greeted by the omelet covered in pizza sauce his sister once made. Tomori explains that she found a cookbook with the secret recipe circled by Ayumi. Yu remembers the last omelet rice he had made by his sister, him smearing out the message. With tears falling from his eyes, Yu scarfs down the omelet after being reminded of his sister. Yu asks Tomori what he should do next. She suggests he join the student council. Yu agrees to come back to the student council after being impressed with her cooking. Episode 8. Yu wakes up the next morning, finally prepared to go back to school. Upon arrival, Yusa and Takayo go to greet him, welcoming him back. Yusa tells him in return for coming back to school, she will cast a spell for being all right. Takayo gets into his fanboy uniform and praises Yusa along with his other classmates. Yu smiles and becomes happy after being exposed to the jokes within his class. Takayo offers to get him lunch and gets injured as usual in the process. Yu notices that Takayo is being overly friendly to him and thinks to himself it will wear off. During their lunch, Takayo receives a text from Tamori telling them to come to the student council room. There, Tamori presents Yusa's new unreleased track to the boys for their opinion. Takayo slobbers over the screen while Yusa dances in the music video to her new song. The music video is their high school, showing different class members. They finish the song and Yusa asks for Takayo's feedback on it. Yusa gets excited after Tamori compliments her for the first time. Tamori calls it trash a couple of times but tells them from a business standpoint it's a 10 out of 10. Yu asks Tamori to tell them the real reason why she called them all to the student council room. Tamori presents to them tickets to her favorite rock band's concert. Tells them she only has 2, so she needs one other person to come with her. Yusa and Takayo both tell her they aren't into rock music much. They suggest Yu go with Tamori. Yu tries to offer it to Misa. She denies it, so they settle on Yu going. On the way home, Yu notices a blind woman walking by her and he notices her voice after hearing her talk to herself. Yu calls her over and to his surprise, the woman asks him for some food. She tells him as long as it has noodles, she will eat it. So Yu guides her to a restaurant. Yu orders some food, realizing that he doesn't have anyone to come home to. The waiter recognizes the woman as Sala from the famous band that Tamori has tickets to. He asks her for an autograph and despite her being blind, she presents a fancy one. Two are served their food and Sala thanks Yu for taking her to the place. Once they step out, Sala asks Yu if he has experienced something bad happen to him recently. Yu tells her she's spot on, so he decides to fill her in on his situation. Yu tells her that his sister passed away. Sala offers to pray for her. After guiding Sala to his sister's shrine, he asks Sala for a favor. He tells her that his friend's sister wants to listen to her music. Yu calls Tamori, telling her, but to his surprise, Tamori shows little to no interest in meeting Sala. Yu tells Sala that the hospital is far away and asks if it's okay for her to follow him that far. Sala tells him she wants to help, so the two of them head to the hospital. During their trip, Sala tells Yu that she is hungry again and wants to eat at a soba place before they get to the hospital. After finishing dinner, Yu asks Sala if she can sign an autograph so well, despite her being blind. Sala tells him that her blindness is payback for all of her sins. She tells Yu that she had always dreamt of being a star, but despite her efforts was never able to succeed. Sala explains that with fame comes resentment from others, which leads to her family being hated as well. Sala tells Yu that she bartered her eyesight away in exchange for peace. They finally arrive at the hospital, and Yu guides her up the stairs. During their walk, Sala asks Yu if there is anyone who has ever influenced him. During Yu's conversation with Tamori, we learn that Yu thinks by letting her brother listen to Sala sing, he might become sane again. Once they finally enter the room, they see Tamori's brother ripping up pillows as his way of performing again. Sala notices this, and instead of backing off, she sings along to the tune he is playing. As Sala continues to sing, he starts to calm down, making it the first time he has been calm without his painkillers. As the ripped feathers fall down, Yu watches as Kazuki, Tamori's brother, listens to her sing. Yu approaches him and asks if he can remember anything, to which he says Tamori's name. On the way back, Yu thanks Sala for singing to him, tells her he will be going to tomorrow's concert. Sala tells him she will sing tomorrow not only for the fans present, also Kazuki in the hospital. After dropping Sala off, Yu receives a call from Tamori, thanking him for bringing Sala to sing. She tells him that this has been the first time her brother has been able to recognize her. For the night of the concert, Yu listens to the track one more time, wonders why it feels so nostalgic. Episode 9. Yu gets ready the next morning, but has trouble finding which outfit fits him the best, him wanting to look his best for Tamori. He runs down the subway station and finds Tamori waiting for him dressed up in a skirt. He tells him it's time to go, and Yu blushes after realizing they are on a date. Yu asks how much Tamori likes them, and she gets really excited about a phone case they produce. Tamori asks Yu if he wants one too. He asks if she is okay with matching phone cases. Tamori tells him not to buy it, but tells him to follow her around even if he's not buying one. When Yu gets closer to the stage, he starts to see more of the brand's logo. He feels deja vu. Tamori goes and buys the phone case and is super excited about it, showing it off to Yu. They take their seats in preparation for the show, and Sala takes the stage. Tamori and Yu listen to Sala sing, and as time goes on, Yu starts to feel strange. Sala announces that the next song is a new unreleased song she is performing for the first time. To Yu's surprise, he somehow remembers that song but realizes that shouldn't be possible. As the song goes on, Yu begins to remember a bunch of stuff, making him freak out. He goes unconscious, but when he wakes up, he is greeted by his sister. Yu tells her that the new song is great. They are forced to stop listening when called for lunch. Yu notices an old man listening to classical music, and he tells Yu he feels bad for him. Yu is unsure why the man pities him, so he asks what he does here. Yu and Ayumi arrive for lunch the next day, and Yu asks Ayumi about the time leap. She tells him she doesn't know much about the ability, and they begin to eat lunch. Yu comments on how the food tastes like medicine as usual. He reveals that the people imprisoning him think his ability is just taking over someone's body for a moment. While he is eating, the helper approaches Yu, telling him he found someone with telekinesis. Yu looks back and sees the man, so he takes him over, stealing his ability. The helper tells Yu that next he will need to take over the person with telepathy to further their plan. Later on, people are seen talking about Yu, saying he has a sister complex. After the end of Yu's lunch, a guard asks him whether he received anything from the helper. He lies and tells them he didn't. Later that day, Yu is forced to do some tests and is then called to his room. Yu is being forced to his room, take Ayumi away from him. Yu awakes in his room to realize that the facility is having a shutdown. Yu attempts to leave his cell and see what is going on, but is unable to. Eventually, the scientist from earlier opens Yu's door, alerting him that his sister's ability went out of control. The scientist tells Yu that they are going to dissect her, and if he doesn't go and save her. Yu asks him how. The scientist reveals Yu's true ability, Plunderer, the ability to take others' abilities and steal them. Yu has no other option but to reveal his true strength. Yu rushes through the gates but stops when someone with telepathy asks him what's going on. Yu steals the man's ability but is confronted by a guard. A couple of people save Yu. He continues to search for his sister. Yu hears someone calling out to him, revealing the mystery man in his dreams has been his brother. As Yu runs from the guards in search of his sister, someone emerges through a wall and tells Yu to take his ability. Yu plunders his ability, then phases through a wall, making him safe. Yu phases through walls, eventually arriving at his older brother's cell, where he is strapped up. Tells Yu he will change the world with his ability for the sake of Yu. Suddenly, Yu wakes up, making that all seem like a dream. He realizes that Ayumi is already dead, but then he considers how real that dream was. After saying that out loud, the helper walks into the room, this time without his hair covered. Introduces himself as Kumagami, tells Yu he knows his big brother. Yu asks him to tell him everything, but Kumagami tells him to follow him. Kumagami tells Yu that he's going to save his little sister. He tells Yu that he should already know what his brother's ability is. Tamori asks to go along with Yu, telling him that his brother was the one who guided her to where she is today. They hop in a car and drive deep within the mountains, eventually arriving upon a rock. There, Kumagami presses a key code and guides them deep within their base. After multiple layers of security clearances, take an elevator down to finally meet Yu's older brother. When Yu walks into the room, he was greeted by his brother who welcomed him and Tamori. Yu, stunned of learning about his brother, is shy to approach him. Yu's brother breaks the silence and tells him it's time he tells him the truth about his time-leaping story. Episode 10. He begins this story by going back in time to when Yu and Ayumi were both grade schoolers. He tells us that after his time leap, he befriended Kumagami and his group, taught them to assist him in changing the world. First, Kumagami finds Shunsuke using his ability, and they quickly become friends. Eventually, Shunsuke is introduced to the other ability users, thanks to Kumagami. Shunsuke gains the members' trust by telling each of them their own abilities. After listing all of their abilities to the slightest detail, they decide to trust him and ask what happened in the future. Shunsuke tells them that they are all captured and tells them they need to form a group to protect each other. Shunsuke reveals that he tried multiple times to escape the grasp of their perpetrators. Shunsuke eventually relies on adults who could have potentially had an ability in the past to help them. On turning 15, Shunsuke realizes if he won the lottery and won a ton of money, he could save the group. Shunsuke presents this idea to the group and decides to leap back into the past. After using this ability over and over again, Shunsuke's eyesight gradually worsened. Shunsuke reveals that he can't use the ability much anymore, him almost being blind. After celebrating his 15th birthday again, Yu pitches an idea to him. Shunsuke gets the idea to build the school, host the ability users thanks to Yu, suggesting he enroll. Shunsuke tells this to Kumagami, tells him he will win the lottery and use the money for creating a safe zone. Tells them that was his last time leap, and it was the one where he was able to purchase the school. Shunsuke asks Kumagami to do him the favor of erasing Yu and Ayumi's memories of him. Also asks Kumagami to continue locating ability users and forming groups with them. Kumagami tells Shunsuke that it would be funny if he drenched himself, put his hair and his face in front of the various groups. Shunsuke reveals that he had Ayumi and Yu's memories erased by one of his friends, one of them putting them to sleep, and the other erasing the memory Shunsuke said his goodbye, thinking he'd never see them again. Tomori is amazed by his story and thanks him for all the work he's done. Shinsuke tells Yu that he has one last time he must do. Shinsuke tells Yu to take his ability and travel into the past with enough time to save Ayumi. Tomori reveals that she has known Yu's true ability this whole time. She tells Yu that after observing him for a while, she learned him thinking it was just possession. Tomori tells Yu she was worried he would possess one of them and take their ability. Having learned this, Yu attempts to use the telekinesis that he stole. He succeeds but ends up throwing the book into his face in the process. Shinsuke approaches him again and asks he will use his ability to save Ayumi. Yu agrees to take his ability and go back in time, reverting back to before she died. Yu checks the time and realizes he has enough time to save her. Going to school the next day, he tells the group that the ability user for the day is most likely his sister. He tells them that only Tomori would make sense to visit. After bringing Tomori, he notices the girl who threatened Ayumi. Yu talks to Ayumi about her cold until he eventually walks Tomori out again. Yu asks Tomori if she would believe he time leaped to save her. She tells him she would believe him, knowing he would go that far to save her. Yu thanks Tomori for being there for him after Ayumi died. Tomori tells him that she has no clue what he's talking about. Tells him he's welcome anyways. Before bed that night, Yu decides to plunder Ayumi's ability, making it impossible for the past to repeat. Yu says goodbye to his sister and is approached by his classmates. Specifically, Takajo is dressed up as a teacher, knowing he is too ripped to look like a middle school student. Later that day, Yu hides within a locker, witnesses Takajo get busted by a teacher. Continues to look around and he sees Yusa draw the attention of everyone around. Tomori finds herself within this all as well and is forced to flee the scene. Yu continues to wait until eventually a horrific scene repeats itself. Girl draws the blade, cornering Ayumi once again, this time, however, not ending the same way. Before she can do anything with the blade, Yu runs out of the closet and uses the telekinesis to scare the girl away. Ayumi thanks Yu for saving her, and he tells her it's time to go home. While walking home this time, Yu is approached first by Kumagami, telling him Shinsuke is waiting for them. Episode 11. Upon arriving at Shunsuke's bunker, the driver receives a call while acting suspiciously. Ayumi, confused by what's going on, asks who Shunsuke is. He tells her he is her long-lost brother, that he had their memories erased. Yu explains that he used the time leap and tells him of the future, and he asks Shunsuke what they should do next with the school, clearly not being enough to protect everyone. Shunsuke tells Yu to lay low in his bunker. There are groups that would capture Yu and use his abilities if they found him. Shunsuke guides Yu and Ayumi to meet with the doctor in Yu's past life. The scientist explains that the abilities are a virus brought to Earth by a comet. The scientist says that whoever inhales the particles emitted from the comet's rocks is able to gain power. The scientist refers to different events in history that were caused by particles from this comet. Shunsuke tells Yu, thanks to him, Japan is mostly under control when it comes to dealing with ability users. However, overseas, it's a different story. Shunsuke tells Yu that in other countries, it's practically a witch hunt for any ability user. Yu asks Shunsuke if he can give Ayumi her true memories back, but he tells her it's impossible. Shunsuke formally introduces himself to Ayumi, mentioning the fact that he is blind. Shunsuke then guides Ayumi to meet with his friends who helped him build the bunker. They all offer to show her their abilities, which leaves Yu all alone. After being forced to lay low in the bunker, Shunsuke offers to be Ayumi's teacher. With Yu having no one to hang out with, he goes with Shunsuke's friends. There, he gambles away all his available cash, eventually losing it all. Kumagami alerts the group that he has found an ability user nearby. He heads into the driver's car, noticing him acting suspiciously. Instead of going the usual route, the driver is forced to take Kumagami to a new location after his family is held hostage. The two eventually arrive at the warehouse and are greeted by 4 foreigners. After arriving and exchanging greetings, the foreigners tell the driver he won't get his family back and he needs to leave. Though he disagrees at first, Kumagami urges him that he will be okay. Driver leaves and one of the foreigners rushes toward Kumagami and knocks him out. They begin to question him, trying to get him to spill information after torture. Torturing him being unsuccessful, the men inject something into Kumagami's arm, making him forget it all when he wakes up. Tomori, on the other hand, wakes up to some racket in the hallway and is greeted by 2 of the men. She is knocked out by one of them and taken hostage. The foreigners call Shunsuke, tell him their only demand for Tomori and Kumagami is to hand over Yu. He tells Shunsuke his demands and tells him if they don't comply, they will kill them all. Shunsuke talks to the driver on the phone, assures him he will save his family. Shunsuke tells what happened to his friend group, and they decide on what to do next. Shunsuke tells them that he can only send his brother in, and is worried for him. One of his friends assures Shunsuke that even if he fails, he can time leap back. Kumagami wakes up and sees Tomori being held hostage alongside him. Shunsuke then tells Yu of the current situation, asks if he's up for saving Tomori and Kumagami. Shunsuke then assures he can always just time leap back if something goes wrong. Tells him there's no way he can do all of that. him being a lousy cheater all of his life. He tells him about all the times when he cheated in life using his ability, making his emotions go uncontrollable. He enters the same state of collapse that Ayumi once did, but is calmed down by his brother, who sits down awaiting the moment where he goes and saves Tamori. There he resolves himself, knowing he needs to rescue Tamori after all she has done for him. Yu heads outside and gets in the car with the driver. There he arrives at the warehouse, where the men give the driver a key to his family's house. Yu readies his ability and possesses both the men, checking their belongings. After confirming they are empty-handed, Yu is approached by a girl who blinds him and slices his eye. Yu attempts to use the collapse ability, but stops after realizing the harm it will do to the area. Yu continues to struggle until he is eventually forced to use collapse after being stabbed in the shoulder. Once Shunsuke and the others arrive, they find the main culprits and Yu after a little looking. Later they find Kumagami impaled by metal bars above Tamori. Having saved her, Kumagami thanks him for all he has done and says his final goodbyes. Episode 12. Pending plastic surgery is Yu. Goes crazy, almost collapsing the area after remembering what happened to his eye. In the nick of time, Yu is stabbed by a serum that stops the use of his ability. Yu asks if Tamori was saved, and we learn that thanks to Kumagami's sacrifice, she is alive. One of Shunsuke's friends tells Yu it's all his fault for Kumagami dying, stating he was trying to save himself before others. They tell Yu it's time for them to leave, but before they go, Yu asks where his brother is. They tell Yu that nobody was as close to Kumagami as Shunsuke was, telling him he needs some time alone. Later that day, Ayumi decides to visit Yu as well, showing she is worried for him. Yu begins to understand Shunsuke's grief, him having lost his sister suddenly before. Yu's next guest is Takajo, who arrives with various meals for him to eat. He reveals it's a special meat, and Yu gets excited and asks him to feed him some of it. Yu asks how Tamori is doing, and Takajo reveals that her injuries were much less severe than Yu's. Next, Yusa decides to visit Yu, offering her some of her homemade stew. Yu remembers the time when he denied it in his last life and decides not to miss this chance. Yu calls Misa from within, asks her what happens to people once they die. Misa explains that she hasn't passed away yet, being strung to Yusa's body. Misa comments on the stew, telling Yu that it used to be their mother's recipe, but Yusa stole it. They switch back, and this time Yu asks Yusa what their parents do. She tells him they work in the mountains, and Yu demands that she goes and pays them a visit. Yu continues his rehab process, getting exposure to Yusa's daily spell in the process. While watching the TV, Yu realizes that she took his advice literally, going and doing an at-home television series. Yusa critiques the food, calling it mid, until Misa takes over, breaks down into tears, calling the food amazing. Parents begin to cry as well and thank her for coming to visit. Next day, Ayumi pays Yu a visit, offering him a pizza sauce omelet to celebrate his 16th birthday. Like all of the others, Yu is fed the food by his sister, and instead of hating the usual sweetness, instead Yu enjoys the omelet thoroughly. Yu decides to get outside and pay his brother a visit after learning he has been sitting around atop the hospital since Kumagami's death. Shunsuke tells Yu that soon the world will become much more dangerous. Yu talks with his brother a bit, but heads back to his room to be greeted by Tamori. Yu tells Tamori what his brother told him about dangerous organizations coming into Japan. He asks Tamori what he should do to stop it, and she tells him there is one way. Tamori tells Yu that if he plunders every ability in the world and takes the vaccine that Shunsuke's scientists are working on, it would all be over. Tamori tells Yu that although he might be able to take everyone over, the amount of power could be too much for him. Tamori tells him that if anyone could do it, he can, having already gone back in time to save Ayumi and going to rescue herself. Mori tells him that it's probably impossible, so just gives up the idea. But Yu tells her he will do it. Tells her that if she would be happy if he did it, then he will because he loves her. Tells her that when he was in despair, she saved him and that he owes his life to her. Tamori tells him that they aren't compatible, so she tells him once he plunders every ability, then they can become lovers. Yu promises her to come back alive and take on her challenge of conquering the world. Mori tells Yu to start with her, giving him the start to his plunder of the world. Later that night, Yu goes to his brother and tells him his plan of plundering the world. Shunsuke breaks down into tears and tells Yu that he doesn't want to lose his brother right after Kumagami. Tells him that he has already started his plunder, having taken Tamori's ability. Shunsuke tells Yu to head overseas, leave Japan to them. Shunsuke reminds him that within a couple years, he will lose his ability, so he must act with haste. Before heading out, Misa and Takayo approach Yu and tell him to take their abilities from them. Misa tells Takayo and Yu goodbye, being unable to come back after he plunders her ability. Takayo presents a letter to Yusa from Misa, saying her final goodbye, thanking her for letting her stay with her. Later that night, Tamori says her final goodbye to Yu, giving him a handwritten study book of phrases in different languages. Episode 13. Yu arrives in the US and makes it through TSA with ease. After getting there, he exchanges information, getting a list of potential ability users. Yu starts with greeting the leader of this organization and stealing his ability. Yu tells him that he has stolen his ability and asks him how to find other ability users. Finds where to go and decides to steal the boy's ability, giving him a tracking ability. This new ability, he is able to find the location of any ability user by simply looking at a map. Yu goes from country to country, taking the ability from everyone he encounters. Eventually gains a name for himself as the One-Eyed Grim Reaper. Eventually acquires an ability that forces anything his left hand touches to freeze. Having acquired various abilities, Yu is able to plunder with rest or need of food. After arriving in a new country, finds large groups of ability users being forced to fight each other. He infiltrates the base and begins to question the different workers, hoping to find out more information. There, Yu learns that not only are there ability users present, but also people called carriers. Carriers are ones who have been exposed to the particles but are not fully infected yet. Cure them. Yu uses a new ability to hasten the virus, then he steals it. After finishing there, Yu arrives at a new warehouse in search of ability users and is welcomed by open fire. Yu deflects the bullets but almost dies after overexerting his ability. Later on, Yu plunders a doctor's ability and decides whether he should fix his eye with the new ability. Yu stops himself and decides not to use the abilities to his own benefit to help the world. Yu, one night, has a nightmare, causing the hotel he is in to collapse. Thankfully, Yu is able to survive, but he misjudges someone wanting to help him as an enemy and almost kills him. Yu stops himself, but over time his condition continues to worsen. Yu wakes up one morning, covered in dirt, and realizes what he did last night. He looks at his map covered in X's, starts to question what he is even doing. After being cornered by a group of thugs, sees the study book given by Tamori, remembers why he is plundering the world, tries to remember, but he is unable to remember who gave him the book to study. Yu continues to travel from country to country, plundering good and evil alike. After taking on more abilities, Yu's sanity continues to worsen, him eventually not caring and just rushing into fights. Yu eventually finds himself in the middle of a desert and questions why he has to do such a difficult task. He decides he will use his ability to take over the world, but regains his sanity after seeing his study book. He kicks it at first without realizing what it is, but eventually rushes over, starts crying just from the thought of it. Instead of just carrying it around, Yu decides to wear the study book as a necklace. He continues to conquer the world, with everyone seeming to know his name. Yu uses his abilities with mastery, showing that nothing is able to defeat him. After arriving in Beijing, he hunts for the last ability user in China, is shot in the back by a crossbow before he can plunder them. Girl walks into the middle of them, telling the bounty hunter that hurting others is wrong. The man shoots an arrow at the girl but is saved by Yu. He realizes that her ability is to have the strongest courage in the world. Yu tells the girl to run away and starts to head back to Japan. While walking, Yu is shot in the back multiple times, rendering him immobile. As the man goes to pick Yu up, Shunsuke arrives in a helicopter, saving him. Sometime later, Yu wakes up to be greeted by Tamori, thanking him for all his hard work. He tells him he kept the promise, but needs to rest for now. Yu asks her who she is, having lost his memory after plundering so many abilities. Tamori introduces herself to Yu as his lover, person he promised to plunder the world. Tells Yu that she was the one who made the study book, asks if he helped him. Tells her that the study book was like a good luck charm to him, kept him sane throughout it all. Tamori begins to cry, thanking Yu and welcoming him back for good.